Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, Tuesday edition. It's July 15th. Nick Whalen, Jeff Erickson here with you. We're presented this week by DraftKings Best Ball. It is DraftKings Best Ball week here on the pod, Jeff. We'll be talking more about that later in the show. But this will be our running backs episode. We previewed quarterbacks a week ago. We'll give you wide receivers. We'll give you tight ends later this month. But we're going to deep dive the running back position. We'll talk about the top of the board, some late round stabs that we've been taking, the running back dead zone, as we've been calling it, looking at rounds 4, 5, and 6. We'll hit on as many names as we can over the next 45 minutes or so, Jeff. And look, I want to start right at the top because even though we have, several elite options, it feels like you can't necessarily go wrong, whether you're clicking on Bijan, Gibbs, Saquon Barkley. Statistically speaking, chances are not all three of those guys will finish as top 3 running backs, or maybe not even top 5 or top 7 running backs this season. How do you rank those three? I'll ask you right off the bat. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley.
So I go Gibbs, Barkley, Bijan, and I know that's a little unusual because I think most people have it the other way around where Bijan's at the top of that list. But here's the thing about Gibbs. I think we saw a different level in him in the second half of the season last year by necessity when David Montgomery was hurt. But also David Montgomery is at an age where I think drop-off starts to happen. The interior of the Lions offensive line is a little unsettled, which means it might require a little bit more throwing. It might require a little bit more outside running. I think that fits Gibbs's game better than it does Montgomery. I think it might be a tick up in volume for Gibbs this year.
I think you can sell me on that. No question about it. I think the Montgomery point certainly rings true. When you look at how Jahmyr Gibbs finished the season last year, actually ended up leapfrogging Saquon Barkley in terms of total fantasy points. Saquon still got him on a per game basis in PPR, but of course, Barkley didn't play in week 18. Jahmyr Gibbs puts up 46 fantasy points in week 18, and that's how he becomes your overall RB1. But you're right. We did see a definitive switch with David Montgomery sidelined where, Jahmyr Gibbs has taken more of the goal line work. He was even more involved as a passer over the second half of the year. He did actually go dry, for a couple of games early in the season when didn't have a single reception against Arizona or Seattle, was relatively quiet in that regard against Dallas, Minnesota, Tennessee, Green Bay. But it felt like as the year went on and even into that postseason game against Washington, 6 catches for 70 yards, they really realized what a game breaker he could be in the passing game.
Yeah, I think so. I also wonder if maybe we see fewer targets to Bijan. I think Kirk Cousins was more likely to check down than Michael Penix was. Penix likes to, can throw outside the hash marks, has more arm strength and more willingness to do so, yes. Which bodes well for Drake London. We'll talk about London in a future episode, how I think a lot of people are high on London this year for that reason. But that's enough. I'm drafting Bijan 4 if he's there. I'm going to be the nice guy. I'll choose the 4th spot and take him there. But I think it's enough to put me below the first 2.
So I would go Bijan Robinson 1, Jahmyr Gibbs 2, Saquon Barkley 3. And, Gibbs versus Bijan, to me, that's an eye of the beholder situation. You could certainly sell me on Detroit being a better situation, even with Ben Johnson gone, even with Frank Ragnow gone, having to rework that offensive line a bit. But I love what I saw over the second half of last season from Bijan Robinson as well. The usage was way up, about 5 more touches per game. I think what you said about Michael Penix versus Kirk Cousins, that is something I'm a little concerned about. Like it's literally as simple as, Michael Penix is capable of throwing the ball downfield. Kirk Cousins was not. We did see a slight dip in the targets for Bijan Robinson toward the end of the season, but he did make up for that with more volume on the ground. And the one thing I want to see from Bijan this season, Jeff, like even through 2 years, he's already established himself as an elite talent. There's a reason he's in the 1-1 conversation. We're not seeing big explosive plays from Bijan Robinson. His longest run last season was 37 yards. Saquon Barkley had like 6 touchdowns that were longer than 37 yards.
Yeah, and that might just be because Saquon's just built different. But you're right. We didn't see the explosion. Is that a function of the offense? Was it a function of Bijan? Was it, how the plays that they ran? These are all, questions. Is this a feature or is this, right, the bug? I will say this though, for all those concerns, he had 6 touchdowns the final 3 weeks of the season, the 3 games that Penix started. So maybe I'm overreacting just a little bit there on the targets and maybe not just in the overall package too.
So the reason I have Saquon Barkley 3rd, and look, I'm still happy to take him in the 1st round, but I've been harping on this all off season. You've heard me do this rant over and over, so I'll try to make it brief, but there is just very little history of a running back putting up a 2,000-yard season, even a running back getting close to 2,000 yards, and then following that up with another similar campaign. A lot of that could be injury related. There could be changes in team context. Now, the latter we don't really have to worry about with the Eagles. Same coaching staff for the most part. All the big names, for the most part, are back on this team. It's pretty easy in theory to imagine them just kind of picking up where they left off last season. But the chances that Barkley stays healthy for a full 16 games like he did last year, the chances that he could sustain that kind of workload, by far the most carries of his career, a guy who's really kind of backed away as far as being an impact in the passing game. We were talking about that on VSiN this morning, Jeff. When he broke in as a rookie, he had 91 catches with the Giants. Like, it's Saquon Barkley is struggling to get to 35 catches these days in Philadelphia. So much of his production, if you play in a PPR league or even a half-point PPR league, so much of his production is ground-based that does worry me a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this then, and to put it into context, are you pushing Lamb or Jefferson? Because I believe you have Lamb over Jefferson.
Yeah.
Are you pushing those two ahead of Barkley? Is there enough concern for you there that you would maybe find a way to not take him safe? He is available at 4. I've seen Barkley drop to 6 in some leagues for what it is worth.
Yeah, I'm looking at NFFC ADP across all their drafts, non-auctions for the month of July. Barkley's gone as high as 2. He's gone as late as 10. Now, if I'm holding the 9th or 10th overall pick and Saquon Barkley's on the board, I think at that point I of course have to take him there. But yeah, I think I would take CeeDee Lamb over him, Jeff. And it's not an indictment on CeeDee Lamb. It's not an indictment, on Saquon. It's not an indictment on the Eagles. It's just there's just no track record for guys having back-to-back ultra elite seasons. And look, last year when you were getting Saquon, maybe at the end of round 1, maybe in round 2, you didn't necessarily need that all-time elite season to get your ROI. You probably doubled your ROI based on how he produced. This year, if you're taking him with the 2nd or 3rd overall pick, it's like you kind of need that to justify it, because there are going to be other running backs that are putting up big-time seasons. There are going to be 2 or 3 receivers that are putting up 23, 24 fantasy points per game. So I'm just kind of playing the law of averages here more than anything, Jeff. Mm-hmm. Again, it's hard to look at the Eagles. It's hard to look at Saquon, where he's at in his career. If you want to bring up the injury history in New York, I think that's relevant. But other than that, it's hard to point to a singular reason why he should regress. It's just there's no historical precedent for it.
Agreed. And the question is, as always, regress to what? Scott Pianowski taught us that many years ago. But the question is how comfortable you are. I mean, the thing is, he was being drafted at the turn last year for the most part, the 1-2 turn. Yeah. Maybe some visionaries had him at 10 or 9. He's going to go earlier than that in every single draft this year.
Right. In some ways, it feels like you're paying last year's price, or you're paying for last year's production, if you will. And look, somebody will probably clip this and I'll look really, really dumb 4 months from now when Saquon Barkley has like 1,200 yards through the first 8 games of the season. But there are other viable options, right? Like to me, you're not, if you're passing on Saquon Barkley with the 4th or 5th pick, you're doing it in the name of grabbing another really good running back like Gibbs or Bijan, or one of the top 2 or 3 receivers in the draft. So it's something that I'm just cognizant of as I build out my portfolio. Well, we'll get to some deeper names as we move along here, but I did want to highlight this comment from the great Uncle Ted, who's always given us great content in the chat. We were talking about Jahmyr Gibbs. He says, just buy the Temu Jahmyr Gibbs in DeAndre Swift.
Okay. Okay. I'm not good on slang. What does Temu mean?
Temu is, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. It might be Temu, but it's like a Chinese knockoff website that is famous for selling, what look like expensive items for like $2.
Okay.
So it's just a discount version.
I mean, we've seen this Swift story. It's not the same. It's definitely a knockoff version. You can buy him too. I mean, the fact is we need more than one running back. Yeah. That's actually a great pairing if you want to do, because if you want to do running back hero, anchor running back, or whatever nomenclature you wish to use, get one of those elite running backs and pair him with Swift later on. Sure, I can see it. The Bears did nothing to improve the running back room, nothing substantial at least. They didn't make a big swipe there. I mean, I think if Jeanty falls to him at 10, maybe we're talking differently a little bit there, but he didn't. So sure, why not?
So I arbitrarily made that top tier: Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, in whatever order you want to put them. For you, would you include Jeanty in that tier? Would you include Christian McCaffrey? Would you think about Achane or Derrick Henry, or are those guys in a separate group for you?
I think that's a separate group. I don't see anybody. I haven't seen anybody penetrate those top 3 yet. I think McCaffrey's got the most likely potential. we see him tearing it up in training camp. Maybe, God forbid, he plays a preseason game to let us see that he's healthy. And I think you'll see him in the top 5 in short order because he does have 1.1 potential again. I mean, I don't see Henry going in the top 5. I could see I have seen Jeanty go there, but I don't think on average you should. Don't get me wrong. I've been drafting Jeanty in the 2 Madison drafts we did. I got him in both leagues. I was at 11th and 12th respectively in those leagues. So I grabbed him, I think, in both of those leagues. So I'm on board with the Jeanty concept here. I don't think I'd take him over those the big 3 though.
I don't think I would either. I'm okay, being a year late on Achane Jeanty if need be. I think the roadmap, the ideal situation is probably what we saw from Ezekiel Elliott his rookie year, right? Where I believe he finished as the RB2 just behind David Johnson, which is a blast from the past. There was a time when we were drafting David Johnson in the first round. But there have been plenty of examples of guys like him hitting the ground running right away in year 1. But I think we also have to be realistic as far as, we're not going to see a Saquon Barkley 2024 level season right away from Achane Jeanty. So I've seen some drafts, and some of these could be variable formats, but where Achane Jeanty is going around like pick 5 or 6, those are outliers to me. I'm not jumping him ahead of any of those 3 backs that we talked about. Not even a consideration for me.
Right. I like Achane's upside. I think he's got a high ceiling too. I like to be positioned towards the back half of the first round. In many cases, getting him is one of my 2 guys there at that turn. Or I should say, I don't know if I like being positioned there, but if I am, I like taking him in that spot. I like getting one of those 4 backs towards the back half of the first round, beginning of the second round. I feel like at least one of them is going to be available to me, and I'm pretty comfortable with all 4.
All right, we'll talk some Derrick Henry in a moment, but first we got a message from the good folks over at Fantrax. Is there something you wish your fantasy league had or features that are missing from your current leagues? Bonus scoring, custom schedules, playoffs, deeper team settings? Well, look no further because we got you covered with our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, or best ball leagues. Fantrax even offers college football fantasy leagues, so go check those out. You can create or join a football commissioner league. You can invite your friends, dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top dynasty fantasy football platform in the industry, and Fantrax is running a special promotion right now that you don't want to miss. You can sign up for free at fantrax.com/rotowire. Enter for your chance to win a signed Jamar Chase jersey. Jeff, they're speaking to you. He signed Jamar Chase jersey. All you got to do, create a new league or bring over your existing leagues for more chances to win. Simply go to fantrax.com/rotowire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about Derrick Henry, Jeff, because I think for a number of years already, Derrick Henry has kind of bucked the trend of running backs that you worry about, given the workload, given his age, going into his age 31 season. But I almost think of Derrick Henry in a completely separate category, right? Physically, I don't know if there have been many running backs that you can even compare to Derrick Henry. Not many that have reached that peak, not many that have had the longevity that he's had. A few injuries mixed in here and there, but for the most part, has been extremely healthy. Second in the NFL in yards from scrimmage last season, 3rd in the NFL in total touches, over 1,900 rushing yards, played all 17 games. Do you have any concerns that Derrick Henry can't repeat something close to his 2024 production?
Nick, I'm going to answer your question by making an outrageous cross-sport comparison because I think that you'll feel.
I know where you're going here.
I'm going to say he's Nolan Ryan.
Okay.
You didn't. I threw you off there, didn't I?
I thought we were going to get LeBron here.
That's more current, actually, more topical. But I'm also stuck in the past too. So you got to remember and account for that. Boom. But he's just built different. Pitchers that throw 98 miles an hour aren't supposed to last forever. They're not supposed to, throw 250 innings. Derrick Henry is a throwback. He is not like anybody else. There'll be a due date. There'll be an expiration date on his career at some point in time. I don't think we've reached it. I don't think he showed any signs of slowing last year. In fact, he got better as the season progressed. I think we can allay the fear that Lamar was going to take away from Derrick Henry. In fact, the running lanes opened up as often happens when you've got a mobile quarterback. Do you get any sort of material passing yardage from him? No, not really. But whenever you had 1 year where he got 33 catches from his 19 last year. That's what you get. You're going to get one out of the blue big passing play pretty much. And then for the most part, it's all going to come on the ground for him, but the volume is there. The Ravens are built to want that. They ran more as the season progressed. They'd like that. I think that should be more of the same from him.
I'm glad you brought up the passing stats, because obviously they're underwhelming, or the receiving stats, I should say, but it does feel like when Derrick Henry catches a pass, it's almost always a big play, or there's touchdown potential, right? You think of the way that they use him in the screen game. I don't think any of that's changing in Baltimore. I mean, I think if you want to be concerned about the age, if you want to be concerned about the mileage, that's totally valid. I have no problem taking Derrick Henry in the latter half of round one. If you can get him early in round two, even better. I think he's got at least one more elite season left in him. And much like Saquon Barkley, the Ravens are bringing everything back, right? It's really hard to pick apart anything they've done this offseason, pick apart anything with the coaching, with the scheme that would give you any concern about Derrick Henry. And the other thing, Jeff, is Lamar Jackson had an unbelievable year, an MVP caliber season. Very easily could have been the MVP, career high in touchdown passes. The rushing yardage was right where it always is, close to 1,000 yards. Like there was no real give and take there, right? Like I think something you can, if you want to put out a knock on Saquon Barkley, it's that he's losing touchdowns very obviously every single week to Jalen Hurts. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson were able to completely coexist.
Yeah, exactly. They complemented each other. In fact, it was a symbiotic relationship. Worked out very well.
All right, I want to have the CMC conversation, Jeff, and we could keep this fairly brief because we've done it before on this show. But Christian McCaffrey, to me, you could talk me into throwing him into that top tier just because we know what the usage is going to look like when he's healthy. We know how good this 49ers team can be. We know how the schedule sets up for the Niners, and obviously we've seen what peak Christian McCaffrey looks like. Are you willing to take the plunge at the updated ADP, which probably means you're going to have to take him in round one at this point? The days of getting Christian McCaffrey in round two, that was 2-3 months ago. That's out the door.
Yeah, agreed. And earlier, I think I might have been on record saying I was uncomfortable doing so. I just don't trust the Niners. I still don't trust the Niners, but there's just too much upside to pass up on here. If you're sitting there at 8 or 9, I think there's a significant change in the tiers there. Like wide receivers, like after Lamb, I think you could make the case. I think I have McCaffrey after Neighbors, but I think if I'm sitting there at 7, I might have a hard time passing on McCaffrey there. And I think before I was kind of just like, nope, I'm not going to do it. Won't be fooled by him. I mean, I avoided that last year. Now, if we get a report says there's some nagginess in his knee or in his Achilles, okay, well then we'll put him back down in the second round. I will have a hair trigger at moving him back down. But for now, no, I just feel like you're passing up on too much. And I think this is a guy, again, could be 1.1. The offensive line isn't peak Niners, but it's also, you still get the Shanahan play calling. This offense is just different when he's there.
So in terms of the ADP at the NFFC right now, Jeff, there's a group of 5 running backs who essentially encompass their own tier. And these guys range from about pick 18, 19 overall to about pick 28. So most of these guys going in round 2. That is Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown, Kyren Williams. Is that a tier for you? Is there anybody else you would add to that group?
I like that. First of all, I do like that tier. Looking at that there. See, you said Taylor, Bucky Irving. I like Taylor over Irving for what it's worth. I like Jacobs maybe more than both of them. Kyren Williams. I like this tier. I like Chase Brown in this grouping as well. I think I've had shares of each of them so far in my various drafts and best ball opportunities here. Yeah, Irving might be the one I've avoided so far, and it's not like I've been trying to avoid him. I just haven't got him. There's always someone that's even higher than me on Bucky Irving.
Right.
I have some hesitation maybe on Kyren Williams. For the second year in a row, the Rams spent a draft pick on another running back. Not insignificant pick. It wasn't like they spent a 7th rounder on a running back. Last year was even earlier. I do wonder, as we see Williams become less efficient per carry, that maybe they have a shift in philosophies, and the volume that carries him here might not be there in the future. So if I have a hesitation, it's Kyren Williams in this tier.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, it feels like, now the hot name is Jarquez Hunter, right? And we're talking about him. Not quite the same level that we were Blake Corum last season, but everything about Blake Corum was positive leading up to week 1, and it just never happened right? I think that the Rams had an opportunity to scale back that workload. And, that was with somebody who they had a reasonable investment in Corum and simply chose not to do it. So I'm inclined to believe that they'll kind of ride this Kyren Williams thing as long as they can. I mean, third in the NFL in total touches last season. He is another guy that doesn't give you a ton through the passing game, really just high level on the ground, not super explosive, doesn't generate a ton of big plays. But again, the Rams just completely ride him, despite having multiple receiving options last year, despite having a nice 1-2 in Nakua and Devontae Adams this year. One thing that I dug up when I was researching, Jeff, is that Kyren Williams not only led all running backs in red zone carries, but led by a mile, 70 carries in the red zone last season. 89% of the Rams' red zone carries went to Kyren Williams. That was by far the highest share of any back in the NFL.
Yeah, and it's clearly the way that they want to run the offense. That they want to have the high volume back. They want him to be the red zone guy. At some point, you just have to wonder: is the juice worth the squeeze? Are they getting that sort of production that they want? That sort of efficiency. Corum never even got a real chance. That's the thing. He was and the one time Williams doesn't play, Corum, of course, is hurt. So, he never even got that chance. I don't know if he'll get that chance. It might go to Hunter. Hunter was awesome at Auburn. You look at a team and just a quick aside, Auburn had terrible quarterback play, horrific quarterback play last year. Hunter was still that productive, knowing that throwing the ball wasn't a huge threat just because of the quarterback play in a really difficult conference. And Hunter was just that productive. So there's reasons to like him, at least in terms of production. Obviously, his measurables matter too and all that. But yeah, he's someone that could be a real threat.
Yeah, I mean, I think he should be. It's definitely odd that the Rams have spent, a third and a fourth round pick now in consecutive drafts on running backs, and then obviously barely used Blake Corum last year. It would be very strange if they repeated that, given the level of investment in those two other backs. But I'm still in on Kyren Williams. I think still going at a pretty reasonable cost. I think part of it too, Jeff, is people just aren't excited to draft Kyren Williams in the same way that they are Bucky Irving. Like Bucky Irving is the shiny new toy, right? He's the guy that he's probably going to go 5 or 6 spots higher because there's somebody in your league who's just like, I love Bucky Irving. I want him.
Yeah. And I will say this about Bucky Irving. I think a lot of people will look at his per carry, per touch production and will extrapolate that over a full season of full touches. There probably are some diminishing returns. And that's even just based on volume, that the more you do it, probably the less efficient you are. But also a new offensive coordinator. Obviously we have to address it. I think it is an issue. And of course, Tristan Wirfs being out at least the first 4 games, that will affect Irving's productivity just as much as it affects Baker's.
Yeah, no question about it. I don't have much to say on Jonathan Taylor, Jeff. I think we kind of know the book on him, right? As long as he's healthy, he's going to be productive. It hasn't really mattered what the quarterback situation has been over the years in Indianapolis. Anything for you on Josh Jacobs? Because we've talked a lot about the first, second half splits for the Green Bay Packers offense last year. Josh Jacobs was just fine earlier in the season, had a couple of big games, especially when the Packers had to go run heavy when Jordan Love was out, but really took off over the second half of the season when we saw a much more limited passing game.
For sure. And I do expect that passing game to be less limited this year. I think you're getting a healthy Jordan Love this year, better receiving options. I think some of those shackles will be taken back off and he'll be able to throw a little bit more often, which hurts the volume on Jacobs. But I also think that leads to more efficiency too. So I think it's okay. I'm willing to make that trade-off. I still think the price on Jacobs it doesn't track what he did last year. It's more in line with the expectations going into last year.
Right.
I'm okay with that price.
Yeah, and I'm wondering even if the attempts are scaled back a bit, we're talking maybe 2 or 3 fewer carries per game, can they get him more involved as a pass catcher? I mean, this is a guy who was pulling in 50-plus catches over his final couple of years in Vegas and then, missed time in 2023, but only targeted 43 times last year. Not necessarily somebody you think of as a great receiving back, but I think that's part of the profile with him. I mean, 9.5 yards per reception last year.
Yeah. Exactly. It'd be nice. And it's not that he can't. It might just be because they have so many different options. That you have your check down option often was Jayden Reed, right? Yep. But no single Packers pass catcher gets over 100 targets, and that seems to be a feature, not a bug. Maybe that'll change in the future here, but the spread around aspect of it there makes it difficult to count on any one player getting a high volume of pass targets.
I mean, Dontavian Wicks was the Packers' highest targeted receiver last year, Jeff. 76 targets. 76 targets for Wicks, 75 for Reed, 72 for Dobbs, 70 for Tucker Kraft, which I think, like you said, is a feature, not a bug. That's how they designed this offense. I don't think they necessarily got the results over the second half of the year that they thought they would. And obviously you're now adding Matthew Golden to that mix as well.
I'd say for the Wicks part was not part of the plan.
Well, there was a time. There was a time when we
all believed in him at one point last year.
Wicks. Yeah, was that like week 4 Fab run? We'll always have that.
Yes.
The next 2 running backs in terms of ADP, Jeff, and these guys are almost in their own very small tier for me. Breece Hall and James Cook. They go definitively behind that tier of 5 that we just talked about. There's about a 7-8 pick gap between Kyren Williams and Breece Hall right now at the NFFC. And then you get another smaller gap, but still a gap between those two and what we will call the dead zone running backs, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, there are. And both are kind of lightning rod sort of guys, right?
Yeah.
Breece Hall, I mean, Aaron Glenn's comments in minicamp really kind of scared a lot of people because Breece Hall was already losing playing time. He was already a guy that was losing touches last year when we were dissatisfied with that. You hear the talk about that going into this year. You're like, okay, go down to what? Where are we at? And again, this was another inefficient runner last year to a certain extent. I think that's what we saw, but there's so much dysfunction on the Jets. Did they root out all this dysfunction, or is there still some remaining? Do they still have to do some pretty critical replacements here? And Hall's got a decent amount of mileage for a guy that young. What sort of things does he have left in the tank? Sometimes running backs drop off earlier than you think they're going to.
Yeah, I'm still buying in on a Breece Hall bounce back, partially because of the cost and partially because of the group of running backs who go after him. Like it's hard for me to say, all right, 1-to-1, do I want Breece Hall or do I want, Kenneth Walker or James Conner, guys like that? I still want Breece Hall in those spots. That doesn't mean I'm clicking on him every time. That's still a range where you could be shopping for a relatively high-end wide receiver. You could be looking at one of the elite quarterbacks in that range, but I'm okay with it. And, part of it is, Jeff, I'm kind of selling myself on Justin Fields as this, wild card quarterback. He's such a unique quarterback in the NFL. Does that in any way open things up more for Breece Hall than a traditional quarterback in Aaron Rodgers did?
It could. I mean, we just talked about the Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson relationship, and we've seen this with other running quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks, and running backs, and how it opens up the lanes, may take away from some touchdowns. Seems like those running backs do fine. I'll pitch this to you as an either or, Nick. Let's say if you're playing the NFFC and you started off, you're lucky. You had Chase at 1.1.
Oh, great.
So coming back, do you take Josh Jacobs at 212 or Breece Hall at 312?
Josh Jacobs at 212 or Breece Hall at 312. I think I'd take Jacobs. I think I would take Josh Jacobs there. I want the consistency with Josh Jacobs, knowing that I've already locked in a high-end receiver 1.
Right. Does the same apply if it's Kyren Williams or Chase Brown instead of Jacobs? Say Jacobs is gone.
I don't think that changes things. No, I like Jacobs over both of those guys. But I think Chase Brown maybe has a higher ceiling given the pass catching potential in Cincinnati, and given the fact that I think they're going to score more points than Green Bay. I think they'll be in more shootouts than Green Bay. No, I would still invest in that first tier.
Yeah, and avoid maybe the Hall tier, taking the chance on Hall and Cook at the next round. I know you like Cook, and not as much as our friend Tom Kasanik does, but still.
I think the regression monster is, of course, coming for James Cook, but I think maybe we are overemphasizing just how much regression there could be. I think it's easy to look at his first 2 seasons and say, okay, 2 rushing touchdowns. Oh, 16 rushing touchdowns last season. Look, he's not going to get to 16 again, but regression could still mean 11 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns, which is probably going to put you in the top 5 or 6 in the NFL. Like that's still fine to me. The bigger threat, I think, to James Cook is just the other 2 backs in this Bills offense, right? It's not necessarily this idea that the touchdowns are just going to regress by default. It's the fact that he's, saw a lower workload, both in terms of pass catching and attempts and just total snaps last season, because I think they really like what Ty Johnson brings. I think they want to see more of Ray Davis. I think there's a reason that this contract dispute is still going on with James Cook, because the Bills feel like they have some degree of leverage. Like they are a kind of find and replace, draft and develop organization, and they've positioned themselves really well to survive a contract dispute, because you have 2 viable backs, 2 very different backs, but 2 effective backs behind James Cook. So to me, I'm more worried about the specter of Ray Davis and Ty Johnson mixing in, this becoming, more of a committee than it was last season, than I am just this idea that James Cook isn't going to score any touchdowns.
For sure. And I'm glad you brought up the contract situation too, because it is contract signing season and upset about contract season. We just saw, a couple of big contracts the last couple of days. We saw Garrett Wilson sign. We saw Trey Smith sign with the Chiefs on a long-term deal. We saw Sauce Gardner get his deal, but we also saw Terry McLaurin really frustrated with the lack of progress in his deal. James Cook is really frustrated with the lack of progress in his possible deal, and the Bills' history probably not coming. He'll probably show up because he's there not to get fined, aka Marshawn Lynch. But yeah, it still could be an issue that lingers.
All right, it's Best Ball Week here on the podcast. We are brought to you, of course, by DraftKings. Here's a message from DK. Football season is right around the corner, and there's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance early than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count toward your quest for a share of $15 million. Look, I absolutely love doing these Best Ball drafts on DraftKings. Super easy, super quick. You don't have to worry about the waiver wire, all that in-season management. I'll tell you, so far, been drafting way too much of my guy, Brian Thomas Jr., getting a lot of Chris Godwin, a lot of Jordan Mason later in drafts. It's been so much fun to enter these Best Ball leagues, try out different strategies, build out a portfolio of your favorite NFL players. You can download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 Best Ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of $15 million. That's two chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. One per customer. Enter the Best Ball $15 million headliner contest by 9/4/25 to get one bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-best-ball. Sponsored by DK. All right, Jeff. It's time to talk a little best ball here. Again, presented by the good folks over at DraftKings, longtime partner of ours over at rotowire.com. How do you attack the running back position differently in best ball than you would a standard redraft?
I think you want to get a floor. I think I'm far less inclined to do a zero or even hero running back approach. I think I'm going to be a little bit more robust. I want to get two running backs in fairly short order to make sure I'm secure there. Take some chances late, but I want that running back floor in best ball. I want to know that those guys are going to be, I'm going to have that on pretty much any given week. I'm going to probably find two different bye weeks for my top two running backs. I think that's something you always have to pay a lot more attention to in best ball than you do in redraft, but you even still, you have to pay attention to that. But I think that's really what you really want to kind of get a little set up there as far as that goes. Other people may feel differently, but I feel like the leagues that I did better in best ball last year were the ones that I had a little bit more security. And I'll take some chances in there. Yeah. I'll swing for the fences with Etienne, but I also want to make sure I may take some riskier players, but I want guys that I know are going to get their chances early on. I'll take my, part-timers, my job battles later on after I get this first two.
Yeah, I think the overall point would almost run contrary to what you first think about in best ball, which is not necessarily a floor. It's the spike weeks, it's the ceiling weeks, and I think that's an interesting way to approach it. I mean, if you're looking for security, and look, if we're talking early running backs, either in standard or best ball, you're getting the best of both worlds, right? Like you could say, oh, there's a really high floor with Chase Brown, but there's also a pretty high ceiling week to week with Chase Brown. That's the case with really any of these top 10 to 12 running backs. But are you looking to mitigate some of that at other positions? Like if you're saying I'm taking a more floor-based approach at running back, does that mean you're taking more shots at wide receiver? Or are you still taking those shots at running back just later on?
I'm definitely taking more shots at wide receiver. That the whole point of getting the two earlier backs is I don't necessarily have the same volume at running back that I do. I mean, it's great if you've got deeper benches, more chances, bites at the apple.
Sure.
But in contests where I may not have as much depth, I want to make sure that I have something steady there so I can, because I think wide receiver performance might vary more from week to week. So that's where you find your spike weeks. Does that mean maybe I wait on quarterback a little longer? Yeah, I probably do. I'm comfortable doing that anyhow. You know that. Yeah. But I think that's maybe the trade-off there, is that I'm making sure I get those two backs.
I'm absolutely willing to wait on quarterback, even more so in best ball than I am in standard leagues, because you don't have to make the choice of which quarterback to start. Right. That's the thing. That's kind of the rub when we talk about, we'll just shop in that, QB 10 to QB 17 range. I'll get two of those guys. Well, every week you're going to have to make a decision. And, sometimes that could be great. Other times that could be terrifying. If you're doing it across like 20 leagues, it could be a little bit overwhelming. And that's one of the great things about best ball on DraftKings is, you don't have to make any of those lineup decisions. You basically, if you roster 3 quarterbacks, you're getting 3 bites at the apple every single week. And I don't necessarily want one of those guys to be Lamar, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. Like, it's great if you have that, but I think you're passing up too much value at the running back position and the wide receiver position in order to make those selections, particularly in best ball. Whereas if I could get 3 quarterbacks between picks 100 and 170, and you're giving me 3 bites at the apple every week, I would rather, kind of spin the wheel on that.
Yep, that seems to make perfect sense. So check, obviously when you're playing on DraftKings, you got to make sure that you're tying it to the scoring system, to the roster requirements, but and dig in and know that versus other platforms.
All right, there we have it. Best ball week here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Want to thank our partners over at DraftKings. Jeff, we've reached that point in the podcast, the running back dead zone. We've talked a ton about it on this show. We've talked a lot about it on SiriusXM, on VSiN. You can find more of our content on both of those platforms. So we got through Breece Hall and James Cook. Now, the start and end of the running back dead zone, I think, is somewhat arbitrary, but you and I have settled on essentially RB15, and to me, it would end at RB20. So at the NFFC, that's Kenneth Walker, Chuba Hubbard, Omarion Hampton, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Joe Mixon.
Kenneth Walker taking strays all over the place from us. Yep, it is. And the reason why we do that is this is where uncertainty kind of creeps in. Now, were there pockets of value within the dead zone last year? Yes, absolutely. Alvin Kamara in particular, that was very valuable early on in the season, especially. Joe Mixon had his moments there too. But this is where the trade-off in risk versus the reward isn't worth it in many cases there. And let's start with Walker. We're talking about a guy that, still has lingering, issues, missed out on mini camps and OTAs this spring on a team that has, shaky offensive line play and a clear alternative, a guy that he may have to share the work with there in Zach Charbonnet. A pick 42, pick 45 as what in that range, whatever. That's a valuable pick. That is a producer. This is someone that's an every week starter. And I'm not sure Kenneth Walker is an every week starter.
Kenneth Walker, to me, bucks the trend of, guys with some obvious red flags, who it's not built into his ADP. I think a lot of these other backs where you're like, well, there's going to be some regression, or, there could be a job battle. He could split the workload. For the most part, all those running backs, I'm like, yeah, the ADP makes sense. This is baked in. People are not drafting him as such. And I think Kenneth Walker is being drafted as if he is for sure the guy in Seattle, and we're counting on him for 15 plus games. I just don't know if either of those things are the case. Like, I think he opens the season as the RB1, but based on what we've seen out of Zach Charbonnet, man, I think this could be a little bit more of a timeshare than we realize. I also just have overall questions about the Seahawks offense, right? Third offensive coordinator in 3 years. You got a new quarterback coming in who's now untethered from Kevin O'Connell. I know you're a little bit trepidatious on both Seattle and Arizona. And, obviously James Conner's in this tier as well. And I'm approaching both of those offenses overall, especially the running back position, with caution when we're talking about an injury-prone guy in Kenneth Walker, an injury-prone guy in James Conner, who's even older.
Both Walker, Conner, Kamara all missed time at the very end of the season last year, and in the fantasy playoffs for us there. It's kind of a harbinger of, what might come. They beat the odds most of the season, but you beat the odds until you don't. Right. At some point in time, it just works against you. And I don't want to be there when the clock stops. I think in all these cases there, at the very least, you better have the top backup. At least in the case of Arizona and Seattle, we know who the clear backup is. We have a very good idea who else to pair with it there. You're going to get Trey Benson if you have James Conner. You're going to get Zach Charbonnet if you have Kenneth Walker. Maybe it's worth it to you. Maybe the price is okay enough, but man, that's pretty high to take a backup running back too. More often in these cases there. Look at Charbonnet in particular. He's like running back 36. That's not a timeshare guy. You know, if he's getting priced along with timeshare guys, but he's really a backup. That's the problem.
Well, so to clarify what you're saying here, if you're taking one of those guys, especially James Conner or Kenneth Walker, you feel like you have to get Trey Benson or Zach Charbonnet. So you're almost tethered to a secondary pick and one that you can't necessarily predict, right? It's not like you can just say, all right, I'll just grab him in the next round. You're not going to reach 30 plus picks for these guys.
Right.
So like, it's easy to say, oh, I'll just get Zach Charbonnet later. What if somebody takes him 2 picks before you? Then what?
Your league mates have picks too. That's a very annoying thing about that. They're looking to take those guys from you. They're looking at that as upside picks too. That's the thing that's frustrating. And how much are you willing to leap ADP to make sure that you have both sides covered? That's always the question. Like, okay, fine. Zach Charbonnet is running back 36. Are you going to take him at running back 30? Same price as Brian Robinson, Travis Etienne. I mean, maybe you are, but just to ensure that you get him. But that, you're kind of have to go up to that level to make sure that you get them. Are you okay if someone snipes them before you otherwise? Okay, that's your choice. I'd recommend not being okay with that.
Of that tier, I'm still okay with Chuba Hubbard. I'm fine with Omarion Hampton, especially in light of Firework Gate over July 4th. And I'm still okay. I'm reluctant, but I'm okay with Alvin Kamara. We've talked about a lot of the concerns with the Saints. It's an old roster. Kamara himself is at age 30. He's been in the league a long time. The quarterback situation's a disaster. I am selling myself in this idea that if maybe like the worse the quarterback play is, maybe the better that is for Alvin Kamara in terms of trying to establish the run, in terms of a lot of checkdowns, just getting him involved, easy passes, getting Tyler Shuck in rhythm. So I don't think I'm as worried about Alvin Kamara specifically as I would be someone like Chris Olave, who of course has concussion concerns, on top of the concerns about that offense. But Connor is a guy that I'm not that interested in. I feel like this could be the year where the health falls apart, and the Texans added Nick Chubb for a reason. I think they see the writing on the wall with Joe Mixon. On the complete other side of this, Jeff, because most of those guys we just talked about are older running backs. We got a bunch of rookies sprinkled in over the next couple of rounds. Travion Henderson, RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, Quinshon Judkins. We'll see where the updated ADP on him falls. But of that group, and we could set Judkins aside for now. So looking at Travion Henderson, RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, who are you most excited about?
So before the Broncos signed J.K. Dobbins, I think the fantasy football community immediately answered RJ Harvey more often than not. I view this as a buying opportunity. I'm still excited about Harvey. I really think he's going to be a really good fit in Denver. I think that you got to have two running backs anyhow. So they could have signed Dobbins. They could have signed somebody else. The point is, there was never going to be a case there where they didn't bring anybody else in. So the fact that Harvey's price has since gone down since that signing, great. I like that. Not to channel my inner Kirk Cousins there. I do like that though. Don't start playing Coldplay or anything like that here, but I would take him over Caleb Johnson and Quinshon Judkins, for instance. I love the Denver offensive line. Yeah. I love the type of back that he fits with the Sean Payton offense. Now, I will say last year's Denver running back experience was painful. That is still a possibility. Estime is still there, for instance. There, they have 4 backs in camp. At least every team does it, but four might make the roster. That makes it a little harder to predict, but give me Harvey, especially if I'm getting it at the new discounted rate.
Yeah. I mean, Harvey is one of those guys that you can still tether to J.K. Dobbins later in a draft, if that makes you feel, more comfortable about that situation. So you can certainly sell me on him. Travion Henderson to me has the highest upside of this group, because if things hit in New England, like some people think they can, then, I think he's a big part of that. But the Ramondre Stevenson factor is still in the back of my mind. I don't think he's just going to be completely tossed aside. You have an experienced head coach coming in, a guy who dealt with a running back in Derrick Henry, who at least, physically was somewhat similar to Ramondre Stevenson, but Stevenson could just play his way out of that job as well early in the season. If he still has fumble issues like he did last season. Maybe they do lean on Travion Henderson, but that one to me, I think could end up being a little bit frustrating, especially over the first half of the year. I mean, the hope is that it's like a Bucky Irving type of situation, because I don't think Travion Henderson is just going to grab this job within 3 or 4 games. But the hope is that he just shows flash after flash after flash, and by week 9, week 10, this is a situation that they can't avoid, and they just have to make him the RB1. I guess the counter to that, Jeff, is maybe this is this year's Chase Brown, Zach Moss.
It could be. It very well could be. Keep in mind, Henderson was in a timeshare in college too at Ohio State. Missed some time. Yeah. Fellow draftee Quinshon Judkins was that timeshare with them last year. They brought him in through the transfer portal. It worked out really well. Not quite a thunder and lightning, but kind of like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see a similar sort of timeshare in New England just to kind of preserve Henderson. And that maybe that's not so bad. Maybe it increases efficiency. Maybe you see Henderson as the pass catching back of the two too. We know Henderson is, of all these rookie running backs, is pretty good at pass pro. That's been stated, I think, 1,100 times in the last 2 months. So I think we'll see him on third downs a lot.
All right, we'll talk about some later round running backs in a moment, some of our favorite late round stabs. But first, we got a message from UltraGM. Is your team's GM messing it up again? If you have ever thought you could do a better GM job than the guy running your favorite team, you should check out UltraGM. UltraGM is a revolutionary new take on fantasy football that makes you the general manager of your favorite team. Start with your team's full roster and build it through the draft, free agency, trades, and even the practice squad to create your ideal team. No fantasy football platform or GM simulator has ever provided the degree of realism and engagement that UltraGM offers, and none has ever given you the opportunity to manage the team that you love and care for most. Compete against family, friends, or even your team's real GM to see who is the UltraGM. You think you can do better than your GM? Visit ultragm.com right now to prove it. All right, Jeff. So getting into an interesting tier here, when we move beyond some of those veterans, we move beyond some of those exciting rookies, you basically get the solid starter. Like we think this guy is the starting running back, but we're not that excited about him tier. That includes Tony Pollard. That includes right now Isaiah Pacheco, who I think is going to continue to rise. Brian Robinson is in there. Then you get to Travis Etienne. He's really the last name that I would include before we get another tier break.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. This is a tier that was actually pretty profitable last year. Chuba Hubbard fell into this tier as well, this rubric as well. Yep. Pollard had his moments. I think he got, the more he got exposed, the more he was kind of a little injury prone. But I agree. I like Pacheco as a target here. I'm comfortable with Pollard, though I think that will be more of a timeshare. And you're a guy, Etienne. Nobody, talk about a guy that I think everybody loves to hate on. And he's been in some kind of weird situations. Yeah. The usage has been kind of up and down, hot and cold with him. Definitely significant profit potential here. This is I've been running with an anchor running back hero build. Yep. I need another running back build section here. I think you throw in DeAndre Swift at the top of that too. I think you could probably throw him into this bunch as well. Yeah. I want one of those guys as my RB2 in that type of build.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, DeAndre Swift is still a little bit ahead of this tier for me. I think Swift and Pacheco are the guys that I would put, ahead of Pollard and Etienne. There's just there's less competition there for me. We could talk about Pacheco coming back from injury, but it's like if you're not drafting Pacheco, who's the other Chiefs running back that you're interested in? We don't even know who that is. And you could say the same thing in Chicago. Even if you're not that big of a fan of DeAndre Swift, you have to respect his role in the offense. You have to respect who's taking over as the head coach. So I totally understand why he's ahead in the ADP. Etienne is somebody that obviously I'm very interested in. I think he's going to win that running back job. With that said, Liam Cohen is coming from a situation in Tampa Bay where really wasn't until the end of the year that Bucky Irving took over as the guy. They used a two-back system. We saw Sean Tucker mixing in. The Jags did add Bashal Tutin. They still have Tank Bigsby. So I could be wrong on that. But I think he is, among this group, the guy who could really, really beat ADP in a big way if this Jaguars offense hits. You mentioned Tony Pollard, this being more of a committee. That's what the Titans are telling us, right? They want to see more Tyjae Spears. We need to see Tyjae Spears stay healthy in order for that to be the case. But that's certainly something to be aware of with him. And Brian Robinson, man, he's just like the most anonymous back in fantasy right now. It's like I don't really respect Austin Eckler at this point in his career, but he looked decent at times. He's still running it back for another season. Part of this, I think, depends on if you think Washington picks up where they left off, or if you think, that was somewhat of a flash in the pan and they do take a step back. But you could sell me on Brian Robinson. He's just the least exciting of this group.
Oh, 100% agree. And the fact that the Commanders did so little at the position, they focused their efforts elsewhere, whether it was offensive line, whether it was, some defense later on as well. They could have gone for this really nice draft class. And instead they did spend a 7th round pick on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, a guy out of Arizona, barely played last year because of an eligibility concern. That to me is like one of those situations there where he may be overlooked. He only played 1 game last year, so who knows what we're going to get out of him. But that might be the sneaky last round pick answer, especially, hey, we were talking best ball earlier. It depends on the depth of your best ball league. That could be a fun pick that, it costs you nothing, but then again, maybe not in a best ball because you need every spot. Every spot is sacred. I don't know. So they're kind of a back and forth as far as that goes.
I do want to take a moment on Jordan Mason, who goes just after that tier of running backs.
Yes.
He to me, of the quote unquote true backups, he's my highest ranked backup. He's the guy that I could see overtaking Aaron Jones. I don't think Aaron Jones stays healthy this season. I think Jordan Mason is going to see a ton of goal line work in Minnesota. I'm a little bit skeptical that the Vikings will be as good as they were, or close to as good as they were last year with an inexperienced quarterback. But either way, I think they brought him in for a reason. All the messaging around Jordan Mason is that this will be more of a 1A, 1B than Aaron Jones being the guy and Jordan Mason, mixing in every now and then. So I'm really high on Jordan Mason. I feel like everybody is starting to come around on him. So not much else to say there, but we got a few more minutes here, Jeff. Any other running backs, going after pick 100 who have really caught your interest?
Well, this is a boring one, but why not Jaylen Warren? I think everyone's crowning Kaleb Johnson as the main guy already. I think it's going to be a 1A, 1B situation there. Warren is not going to be a full-time workhorse back, but I think he's going to be useful in this offense. It's boring at 102, but sure, I'll take him. I think Isaac Guerendo is a must roster if you have McCaffrey. And I think he's a fun guy to steal away from the McCaffrey owner. So that's another guy I think I'm going to end up with a lot of shares of. And then why not Ray Davis? If you're really worried about James Cook's contract situation, Davis has shown with opportunity, he can be a capable back. So I think I'll have a decent amount of him on my redraft leagues as well.
I'll pick out Tyjae Spears, and we mentioned him briefly with Pollard. I mean, obviously he has to stay healthy, but they're telling us they want him more involved. I think you'd be surprised how involved he's been in the passing game these last couple of years, Jeff. 105 targets over the last 2 seasons, despite missing half of last year, being perpetually banged up. I don't think the Titans are going to be this year's Commanders, where they just hit the ground running with a rookie quarterback. But I think this offense could be better maybe than we expect. So I have some interest in Tyjae Spears around pick 120. Guerendo was on my list as well. I think Trey Benson, the obvious handcuff in Arizona. Our guy Jaydon Blue in Dallas has been getting a lot of love in the chat from Uncle Ted. I did a video a few weeks ago, looking at some kind of boom bust guys, some running backs I'm taking shots on. I put Jaydon Blue on the list. I got some blowback. Some people think it'll be Javonte Williams. I just think Dallas is going to need some level of explosion in this ground game. I don't think Javonte Williams is providing that. I don't think Miles Sanders is providing that. If you want explosion, it's Jaydon Blue. I think he's the guy that brings the excitement factor that this running game is going to need, and clearly lacked in so many ways last season. So if you're taking a late round stab on a running back, I would rather take a shot on him than Tank Bigsby or someone like Rachaad White, who goes like a round and a half ahead of him. And then I'll mention 2 more real quickly. These are clear number 2 backs, but also guys who I think are high level fill-ins if the starter goes down. They're really close to each other in ADP right now, not being drafted even in every NFFC league, but most. Tyler Algier in Atlanta, Braylon Allen with the Jets.
Yeah, these are the guys that we get annoyed at because they're taken away from our starters, which means they're useful, right? That means they're getting enough playing time that they're going to have their weeks. Tyler Algier in particular, I mean, it's like, give Bijan the ball every time. Come on. But if you do that, you're probably gonna break him. And Algier has proven to be capable over the years. Yeah, he's just good, just enough to be annoying to us. But yeah, he's good. I agree. And then Allen's getting into that. This is just his second year. He's young, by the way. Braylon Allen's really young. Still, there's still a palpable upside. So yeah, I think that's a very good idea too, as well as late round guy you can add for sure.
All right, we'll wrap it up there. We will talk more Quinshon Judkins and the Browns at some point. Just too early in that process to give a definitive opinion, but obviously that'll be one of the big question marks as we get closer and closer to training camp. But we'll be back with you next Tuesday. We'll be with you every Tuesday from now through the end of the NFL season, talking receivers next week. We are brought to you by DraftKings. We want to thank our other sponsors, Fantrax, UltraGM. Go check those out. You can find the links in the description. And check out all of our content if you're watching us live here on the RotoWire YouTube channel, putting out a ton of videos this time of year. Make sure you use that promo code YouTube15, 15% off any of our subscriptions. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button right now. We'll talk to you next week.